My name isn't Maggie Peterson, but let's call me Eleanor Vance. And 82. Although some days feel significantly older. My bones protest as I rise from my bed each morning. A slight tremor affects my hands as I prepare my morning coffee. Yet my mind clings to the past with the tenacity of a cherished keepsake. A succulent roast turkey, creamy mashed potatoes with gravy, and all the trimmings. I even baked a pecan pie, Sarah's favorite, and a red velvet cake for little Thomas. For weeks I'd anticipated this day, hoping it would reunite the family, reviving the cherished memories of years gone by. I harbored a secret hope that perhaps they would finally return, just as they once did, but they didn't. Dinner was prepared, but the chairs remained unoccupied. The table, set for 6, held only one laden plate. The wind's mournful cry through the trees amplified the silence within the house, a silence more profound than any tempest. Before proceeding, please remember to like, subscribe, and share to assist our channel's growth. Leave a comment indicating your viewing location. Thank you for your support. I initially contacted David, expecting an immediate response. However, as usual, my call was diverted to his voicemail. Then I tried Sarah. The same outcome. No answer. I attempted again. Still nothing. A wave of despair washed over me. I hadn't seen David or Sarah in months. The occasional text message provided a meager connection, but it wasn't the same. Their visits had ceased entirely. I'd received invitations to their homes perhaps once or twice, but it was clear I was merely a tolerated guest, a distant relative they felt obligated to acknowledge. Hi David, it's Mom. Just checking if you and Sarah were still planning on joining me for dinner. I made your favorites, and Thomas's birthday cake is ready. Please call when you can. I disconnected the call, the oppressive silence clinging to me like an unwelcome shadow. No one was coming. No one had ever been coming. Setting the table, preparing the meal, waiting for their arrival. But today felt different. Today, I could no longer ignore the stark reality. I wasn't merely forgotten. I was insignificant. My phone vibrated, jolting me from my reverie. Another text from Sarah, unrelated to dinner. It pertained to a family vacation to the Bahamas they'd booked for New Year's. She briefly mentioned needing someone to watch their pet while they were away, but that was it. No mention of Christmas, no apology for their absence, a cursory request, as if I were an afterthought. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had devoted my life to their care, cooking, cleaning, childcare, and endless worry, always available whenever they needed me. Yet today, they couldn't even manage to attend a simple dinner. And when I attempted to elicit a sense of guilt, they didn't even bother to return my call. I sat there for an extended period, staring at the untouched food. My heart ached, but I didn't cry. What was the point? They would never change, and I refused to spend another year pretending everything was fine. I wouldn't remain here, waiting for a family that didn't want me. I retrieved my phone, dialing a number I hadn't used in months. It was Martha Thompson, a woman residing just down the street. She was one of the few individuals who consistently inquired about my well-being, even when everyone else had forgotten. When Martha answered, I remained silent initially. I was incapable of speaking. I simply sat on the front porch, allowing the cool night air to dry the tears I hadn't realized I'd shed. Martha, I finally whispered, my voice barely audible. I think I've reached my limit. I can no longer continue this. A lengthy pause ensued before Martha responded. Eleanor, I'm so sorry. You deserve far better than this. I longed to express more, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I ended the call and returned inside. My gaze fell upon the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, a reminder of the to-do lists and appointments I'd postponed for weeks. That's when I made my decision. I wouldn't wait any longer. I wouldn't sit around, hoping someone would notice me. I would live my life, for myself, for once. No more looking back. No more waiting by the phone. I accessed my laptop and booked a flight to Rome. I had no concrete plans, only a desperate need to escape from the stifling silence, from the feeling of being nothing more than a ghost in my own family's life. I had always been the quiet one, the one who remained in the background. I never demanded much, just a phone call, a visit, a simple I love you, occasionally. But I'd waited so long for these things that I'd forgotten what it felt like to live for myself. I awoke the following morning to the golden sunlight streaming through the curtains. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel the compulsion to check my phone the moment I opened my eyes. I didn't have to wait for anyone's call. I didn't have to worry about preparing dinner on time or cleaning up after those who never appreciated it. I rose and stood before the mirror. The woman staring back was unfamiliar. Gray streaks threaded through her hair, lines, etched on her face, spoke of laughter and tears, and a sadness lingered in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. I studied her for a moment, before a smile graced her lips. It wasn't a sad smile, it was genuine. It was the first time in years I had truly smiled at myself. I showered, dressed, and prepared a cup of tea. The house remained quiet, no phone calls, no knocks, no rush. For once, the stillness wasn't oppressive. It was peaceful. I took my time getting ready. I was in no hurry. I didn't need to be. Around midday, I finally stepped outside, feeling the crisp air on my face. It was colder than expected, but it didn't matter. I was leaving all of this behind: the hurt, the neglect, the years spent catering to everyone's needs, except my own. It was time for something new. I went to the library, my usual refuge. The scent of aged books and the quiet hum of the place grounded me. As I entered, I saw Martha sitting at a table, a book in her hands. She looked up and smiled, her eyes conveying understanding. "Eleanor, how are you managing?" she asked, her voice warm, as if she already knew the answer. "Better, Martha. I'm better," I replied. We talked for a while about life, the weather, anything and everything. But throughout our conversation, I couldn't shake the feeling that something within me was shifting, awakening. I wasn't just taking a trip to Rome, I was reclaiming my life. This feeling of freedom, of choice, was extraordinary. The weight that had burdened my chest for so long was finally lifting, and I could breathe without the constant pressure of my family's expectations. When I left the library, I knew I wasn't just walking away, I was walking towards something new. I didn't know what Rome held, whether it would transform me, or simply provide temporary respite from the pain. But I wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to be alone. The following morning, I was en route to the airport. A mixture of apprehension and excitement, but mostly anticipation, filled me. The world felt vast and open, and I had no idea what awaited me, but I knew it was time to discover. When I boarded the plane, my heart skipped a beat. Rome, I was finally going. For me, for no one else. I wasn't sure how long I'd stay. A few weeks, perhaps longer. But as the plane ascended and the runway lights faded into the distance, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I was free. I'd never been to Rome before. I'd read about it, seen countless films set there, and imagined strolling its cobbled streets, sipping coffee at a sidewalk cafe. But none of those thoughts felt real until now. It wasn't exactly an escape. It felt more like opening a door I'd kept shut for years, to see what lay beyond. And so, there I was, seated in a small Roman cafe, sunlight warming my face, the gentle murmur of Italian conversations surrounding me, and an undeniable buzz of excitement in the air. I had no plans, no schedule, only freedom. I savored my coffee, gazing at the bustling street, people hurrying past, each immersed in their own world. A woman with a vibrant scarf, a man in a sharp suit, a child skipping beside his mother. I couldn't help but smile, watching them. It was beautiful. It felt like a city brimming with possibilities, where no one cared about your past, where you could be anyone, do anything. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't worried about anyone else. Not dinner, not my children's well-being, not the fear of being forgotten again. Here, in this moment, I was simply Eleanor. No labels, no expectations, just me. I retrieved my phone, intending to check the time, but noticed several messages, texts from David and Sarah. Both apologized for missing Christmas, offering excuses about work and commitments. One from Sarah read, "Sorry Mom, hope you're doing okay." It stung, but I didn't let it affect me. I put the phone down, deciding to leave the past where it belonged. I wouldn't be the mother who waited, the grandmother clinging to every word, hoping for recognition. If they wanted to connect, they would, but I wouldn't chase them anymore. Not now, not in Rome. I decided on a walk, letting my feet guide me. The Tiber River wasn't far from the cafe, and soon I found myself by the water, watching the city's reflection ripple on the surface. Boats drifted by, their white sails catching the sunlight. Tourists gathered on the bridges, capturing memories, laughing, enjoying the moment. I felt part of something larger, something not defined by family or responsibility. It was about me, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of that. I didn't know what I sought in Rome, or if I'd find it. But I knew the city offered space to rediscover myself. Perhaps not immediately. Perhaps it would take weeks, months, but I was here, and that was the crucial first step. The only true journey is the one that leads us back to ourselves. It struck me with profound impact, as if intended for me personally. I purchased the book, unsure why, but it felt necessary. Leaving the bookshop, I felt lighter. The world didn't feel as heavy as it had just hours earlier. For once, I wasn't burdened by things beyond my control. I didn't have to be anyone but myself. Returning to my hotel, I realized I'd taken my first step into something new, something uncertain, but something that would eventually make sense. And in that moment, Rome wasn't just a city. It felt like a second chance. I had no idea where this journey would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I was eager to find out. The following days in Rome were profoundly transformative. The city's energy became my own. Each morning brought excitement, as if every street corner held a new beginning. I explored, wandered, and allowed myself to get lost in the maze of cobblestone streets, finding beauty in the smallest details: a cafe with a striped awning, a vintage shop tucked between narrow buildings, an elderly woman selling flowers from a cart. I felt alive again, but despite my efforts to shake it off, the weight of my family's rejection lingered in the back of my mind. I couldn't avoid it forever. I knew that upon my return to the States, things wouldn't be the same. They couldn't be, not after everything, not after the truth I had finally acknowledged. I had been nothing more than a safety net for David and Sarah, someone they called upon when they needed help, when they couldn't manage their own lives, and when they no longer needed me. When I became an inconvenience, they discarded me. It wasn't just about missing Christmas dinner. It was about years of neglect I'd ignored, pretending everything was fine. The initial days in Rome had been an escape, a respite from the pain, but now, I had to confront it. I knew I must, so I called Martha. I didn't need reassurance or sympathy, but Martha was one of the few who saw me for who I was, not who my family wanted me to be. "Martha," I said when she answered, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm in Rome, and I've been reflecting on everything. David, Sarah, how I've lived my life." I paused, gazing out the window of the small cafe near my hotel. "I can't continue pretending, can I?" A long pause followed, and I could almost hear Martha considering her response. "No, Eleanor, you can't, and you don't have to. You've given so much of yourself, but now it's your time. You must live for yourself." Her words hit me harder than I anticipated. I'd known it deep down, that I'd been giving from an empty cup, until nothing remained. But hearing someone else say it aloud made it real. "I don't know where to begin," I said, tracing my finger around my coffee cup. "It's so difficult to relinquish all of it. The hope that things could be different, that they would care enough to try. I know, Eleanor, but they won't change. You've sacrificed so much, and they still don't see it. You must start seeing it for yourself. You're not just their mother, you're Eleanor, and that's enough." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. It was true. I wasn't just a mother, a grandmother. I was Eleanor Vance, a woman deserving of love and care, not out of obligation, but because I was worthy. "Thank you, Martha," I whispered. I needed to hear that. We spoke for a while longer, but by the time we said goodbye, I felt a shift within me. It wasn't dramatic, not a sudden epiphany, but the beginning of something I'd needed for so long. I sat back, gazing at the Roman streets, letting the world flow by. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about my children, wondering when they'd call or visit. I wasn't holding my breath, hoping they'd notice me. I was thinking about myself, about my desires, about the life I still had to live. I didn't know what came next. Perhaps I'd stay in Rome longer, perhaps return home, and try to rebuild, but on my terms. Either way, I was done waiting for my family to determine my worth. I was the only one who could do that now. A few days later, I found myself in a small Roman park, the kind not featured in tourist guides, tucked away, hidden behind ivy-covered gates, with benches under ancient trees, and vibrant flower beds. The sun was warm, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. It was peaceful, the peace I'd been seeking. But beneath the surface, something else stirred, something I couldn't escape forever. The truth about my family remained, and it wouldn't disappear just because I'd crossed an ocean. I had been avoiding it. The calls, the confrontation, but that didn't alter reality. I'd spent my life being the reliable one, always there when needed. And now, sitting in this park, I realized I had to face the inevitable. I had to deal with them, or at least decide how to stop letting them control my life. I took a deep breath, my fingers brushing against my phone screen. Without hesitation, I dialed David's number. My heart pounded as the phone rang. For a moment, I almost hung up. What would I say? It wasn't him I feared, but the weight of everything between us, the lies, the neglect, the way they'd pushed me aside. I wasn't ready to confront that, but I had no choice. The phone connected, and David's voice filled my ear. "Mom." I didn't speak at first. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. David, it's me. I need to talk. Silence followed. I heard the sounds of his office, keyboard clicks, the rustling of papers. Finally, he spoke. I didn't expect to hear from you, Mom. I thought you were doing fine. You've always been independent. It stung. He meant it dismissively, but the words hit harder than I expected. My independence? Since when did that matter to you? I'm fine, I said, my voice calm despite my racing heart. I'm in Rome, David. I've been thinking about us. Another silence, a palpable wall rising between us. Rome? You're really going to make this about your trip to Rome? No, I said quickly. I'm not making it about the trip. I'm making it about me, about how I've been treated. His tone shifted, becoming defensive. Mom, I didn't mean for things to become so distant. I'm just busy with work. Sarah is too. We have our own lives, and you have yours. I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. A cold laugh escaped my lips, quickly suppressed. You don't understand, do you, David? I asked softly. This isn't about being busy. It's about the fact that you've stopped making time for me. You've pushed me aside, as if I'm a burden. I could hear him shift in his chair, silence hanging heavy in the air. That's not fair. You know that isn't true. But I wasn't finished. I had to say it. David, the truth is I've spent years making excuses for you and Sarah. I've convinced myself it was okay to be the background character in your lives, because I thought that's what mothers do. But I've realized I've been wrong. Another pause, then his voice, quieter, more hesitant. What are you saying, Mom? I'm saying I'm not going to play that role anymore, I said, my voice firm, despite feeling on the edge of something significant. I've spent my whole life putting everyone else first. David, I've been there for you through everything, but I can't do it anymore. I've given everything I had to you, and now it's my turn. He was silent so long I thought he'd hung up. Then he spoke, his voice breaking the tension. I didn't know you felt this way. I've been trying to make you realize it for years, but you never listened, I said softly, my heart aching. But I'm done. I'm not just your mother, David. I'm Eleanor, and it's time I started living for myself. The line fell quiet again, the hum of distant traffic audible. I stood there, holding the phone, waiting. I didn't expect an apology. I didn't expect him to suddenly change. But for the first time I didn't need to wait for it. I hope one day you understand, David, I said quietly. But until then, I'm going to take care of myself. I hung up without waiting for a response. It was difficult. My heart was heavy, but my mind was clear. This was the right choice, for me, and if they didn't understand, that was something I'd have to live with. But for now, I wouldn't worry about that. I was in Rome, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally starting to live for myself. The week in Rome was everything I needed. The city, with its vibrant energy and quiet corners, had given me space to think, breathe, and rediscover myself. I explored museums, sat in parks, read my poetry book, savoring every word. Rome had become a place where I could simply be Eleanor, but as much as I tried to escape, I knew the time was coming to face the reality I'd left behind. No matter how far I ran, the issues with my family remained, and sooner or later, I would have to return. It was a quiet morning, when I sat in my Roman apartment, sipping coffee by the window. The apartment had become my sanctuary, a place of peace I hadn't known in years. But now, as the sun streamed through the windows, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was avoiding something, the reality of my return. I hadn't contacted David or Sarah since our last conversation. I'd considered it, but the words got stuck in my throat. I wasn't sure what else I could say. I'd said everything I needed to say, but a small part of me wondered if they'd somehow understood, if this time would be different. When my flight back to the States was booked, I didn't feel the same excitement as when I'd left. A knot formed in my stomach, a nervousness I couldn't shake. What would they say? What would they think? The flight was long. I didn't sleep much, instead staring out the window, lost in thoughts of everything I'd left behind. The house, the years of service, the love given without expectation. When I landed, the reality hit me as soon as I stepped off the plane. The rush of people, the bright lights, everything felt overwhelming. I'd been living in Rome, breathing different air, experiencing a new kind of freedom. But here I was, back in a life I'd tried to escape. I didn't go straight home. I went to the library, a quiet place to gather my thoughts. As I sat there, my phone buzzed in my bag, a text from David. Mom, we need to talk. Please come by the house. Sarah and I are worried about you. I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the screen. They were worried about me. After everything, after the silence, now they were concerned. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. Instead, I left the library and walked back to my apartment, the weight of the text pressing down on me. My mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Part of me wanted to go, to give them a chance to explain, but another part knew nothing would change. They'd shown me who they were, and now, I needed to show them who I was. The following morning, I finally decided to visit the house. It wasn't about confrontation, it was about reclaiming my place. I didn't know what I'd find, but I couldn't postpone it any longer. As I approached the front door, I hesitated. It had been so long since I'd entered without feeling invisible. David answered, his face tight and tense, his eyes avoiding mine. "Mom," he said, his voice low. "Come in." I stepped inside, the familiar scent surrounding me, but this time, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a place I no longer belonged. "I'm sorry," David said, his voice shaky. "I should have been better. I should have understood." I interrupted, my voice steady but firm. "David, it's too late for should-haves. You've had your chance. You've had years to make things right, and you didn't. I'm not going to sit here and beg for scraps of your attention anymore." Sarah entered the room, her face full of worry. "Mom, we've been so worried about you. We didn't know what to think. You left without saying anything." "Scared?" I wanted to laugh. They hadn't been scared when they pushed me aside, when they lied and ignored me for years. "Scared?" I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. "I'm the one who's been scared. Scared of losing myself while trying to be everything for you." "Well, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not afraid of losing you, David. But I won't let you treat me like I don't matter." Silence followed, and I saw guilt in David's eyes. Sarah looked between us, unsure how to respond. Finally David spoke, his voice quieter. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I never wanted to make you feel like this." "I know you didn't mean it, David," I said softly. "But that doesn't change what's been done. I've spent my life sacrificing for you, for Sarah, for this family. But now, it's time to live for myself." Sarah's face softened, and for a moment I saw the daughter I once knew. "I understand, Mom," she whispered. "I really do. I'm sorry for everything." And in that moment, I knew things had shifted. Maybe not everything was fixed, but it was a start. I wasn't done fighting for my place, but for the first time I was fighting for the right reasons, because I mattered, not because they needed me. The days that followed were a mix of clarity and unease. It felt strange to finally speak my truth, after all these years. A weight lifted, but it was replaced by something else, a new responsibility. I couldn't return to the way things were, to the version of myself who kept quiet, who let people walk all over her. But even as I stood firm, part of me worried that this new version would push my family further away. I wasn't sure I was ready for that. I'd always bent over backwards, forgiven, given, and given. Now I was saying no. It felt strange, empowering, yet deeply unsettling. I spent the next few days in the city, taking long walks, finding small cafes to read. Each day felt like a new beginning, yet I couldn't shake the thought that I was standing at the edge of something I didn't fully understand. Something was shifting, but I wasn't sure where it was going. Then, one afternoon, as I sat on a bench near the Pantheon, the phone rang. It was David. I stared at the screen, wondering what this call would be about. Part of me wanted to ignore it, let the silence settle, but I realized I couldn't run from this. I'd faced the truth once, and I wouldn't back down now. I answered. "Mom." David's voice was softer, the usual frustration gone. "We need to talk." I took a deep breath. "David, I think we've talked enough. I've said what I needed to say." "I know," he replied quickly, "but I've been thinking about it, and I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much I'd been hurting you. I've taken you for granted for years, and it wasn't fair. I'm not making excuses, Mom. I just want to make things right." There was a quiet sincerity in his voice that made my heart ache. It had been a long time since I'd heard him speak like that. He'd always been the strong, dependable one, the one I thought I could rely on, but I realized I'd been too dependent on him, too reliant on the idea of him being the son I wanted, instead of accepting who he had become. "I don't know if things can go back to how they were, David," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You've hurt me in ways I didn't realize until recently, but I don't want to fight with you. I want us to find a way to coexist, to understand each other. But I'm not going to keep sacrificing myself to make things easier for you or Sarah anymore." There was a long pause. "I understand, Mom. I really do. And I'll work on it. I'll work on being the son you deserve." I felt tears welling up, but I pushed them down. This wasn't about fixing everything at once. It was about creating space for us both to change. "Thank you, David," I said, my voice steady. That's all I needed to hear. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up, the knot in my chest loosening slightly. Maybe it wasn't the end of everything, Maybe it was the beginning of something new. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I'd finally found the strength to demand what I deserved, not just from David and Sarah, but from myself. As I walked back to my hotel, I thought about how much had changed. A few weeks ago, I'd been a woman waiting for a call that never came, invisible in her own family. And now, I was a woman who'd found her voice again, ready to speak up and live for herself. The Rome I'd imagined wasn't just a city of romance and adventure, it was a city of renewal. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for someone else to change things. I was making the change myself. A few days after my conversation with David, I returned home, to my small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in a long time, it felt like I had something to call my own. Yet, the feeling of unfinished business lingered. The call with David had been a step forward, but I knew more needed to be done. I'd spoken my truth, but hadn't confronted them in person. I hadn't yet faced David and Sarah directly, to let them see who I was now. I was still the woman they'd taken for granted, the one who quietly endured. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I'd done things differently this time. I'd walked away, I'd taken time for myself, and now I had to return, not to beg, but to show them that I would no longer be the woman they could dismiss. I dialed David's number again, but this time, I wasn't calling to ask him to come over. I wasn't pleading. I was setting boundaries. I was letting him know I wasn't afraid to stand up for myself anymore. "Mom," David answered. His voice was cautious, but lacked the defensive edge. "I need to see you, David," I said, my voice steady. "We need to talk, in person." A long pause, then a sigh. "Okay, when? Where?" I knew this conversation wouldn't be easy, but it had to be done. "I'll meet you at the cafe by the park in an hour, and bring Sarah. We need to have this conversation together." I hung up before he could protest. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I wasn't going to let the conversation drag on for weeks. The moment had arrived. The cafe was small and quiet when I arrived. I sat down at a table by the window, my hands folded. I wasn't nervous. I was prepared. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. When David and Sarah arrived, they looked different. David's face was tense, his usual confident stride replaced with a hesitant shuffle. Sarah wore her mask of concern, but it was clear she wasn't sure how to handle this. They sat across from me, a heavy silence falling before either spoke. "Maggie," David started, but I raised a hand. I wasn't here to let them apologize repeatedly. "I'm not here for apologies," I said, my voice clear. "I'm here because I want you both to understand something." Sarah looked at me, eyes wide. "What's going on, Mom? You've been distant. You left without telling anyone. We've been worried about you." I didn't flinch. I wouldn't let them make me feel guilty for finally doing what I should have done years ago. I wasn't worried about being distant, Sarah. I was worried about how much I'd been giving, and how little I had left for myself. I've spent years accommodating you both, trying to fix everything, trying to be everything. But I've realized something. I don't need to be that person anymore. Sam opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. "This isn't about you two. This is about me. I've spent my life putting everyone else first, and I'm done. You don't get to treat me like I'm invisible anymore. You don't get to ignore me, to make excuses, to push me aside just because it's easier for you. I'm not a burden, David. I'm your mother, and it's time you started treating me like I matter." There was a long pause. David's eyes were on the table, his hands fidgeting. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. I could see they wanted to say something, but the words were caught in their throats. Finally, David spoke, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I thought I was just trying to manage everything. But I see now that I've taken you for granted." Sarah nodded, but didn't speak immediately. She looked at me, her expression a mixture of guilt and regret. "We're sorry, Mom," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to make you feel like you weren't important. I didn't see it until now." I took a deep breath. "Sorry isn't enough, Sarah. You can't just apologize and expect everything to be fine. I'm not asking you to change overnight, but I'm asking for respect. You both have to realize that I'm not here to be your backup plan, your fixer, your solution when things go wrong. I'm here to live my life too." There was silence again, but this time it felt different. It was the kind of silence that came when people finally understood what had been left unsaid for too long. "I'm not going to disappear when I'm inconvenient," I said softly but firmly. "I won't let you push me aside anymore. If you want a relationship with me, then it has to be based on respect, not just when it's easy for you." David looked up, his face softer than it had been in a long time. "I understand, Mom. I really do." Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered. I don't want to lose you. I'm not going anywhere, I replied, my voice steady. But things have to change, and that starts now. It had been a week since my conversation with David and Sarah, a week since I'd finally found the courage to stand up for myself, to let them know I wouldn't silently wait for their love and attention. I didn't expect everything to change overnight. I knew that. But I could feel the shift, like a small crack opening in the wall I'd built around myself. I spent much of that week reflecting, taking long walks, sitting on the park bench where I'd first found the courage to call David. I knew I wasn't done yet. There was more work to be done, both with my family and with myself. But the quiet joy of being in control of my own life was something I hadn't felt in years. Rome had given me more than just a break. It had given me a glimpse of what life could be like when I wasn't always living in someone else's shadow, when I wasn't trying to fit myself into a role that no longer worked for me. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was from David. Mom, can we meet? I think we're ready to talk more. Just the three of us. A surge of mixed emotions, nervousness, anticipation, but also a deep sense of pride washed over me. He was reaching out, they both were. This was it, the chance to rebuild something, but it wouldn't be the same. It couldn't be. This time the rules were different. I agreed to meet them at the same cafe. As I walked there, I thought about everything that had led to this moment, the years of sacrifice, the quiet hurt I'd swallowed, the loneliness I'd masked behind my smile. When I walked into the cafe, David and Sarah were already seated at a table by the window. David looked nervous, his hands gripping his coffee cup. Sarah, too, had that familiar look of concern, but there was something else in her eyes now, something softer, more open. They both stood when I approached, and David offered a tentative smile. Hey, Mom, he said, his voice almost too soft. We've been talking, and we just wanted to let you know that we're sorry, really sorry. I think we've taken you for granted, and we want to do better. Sarah nodded, her eyes full of emotion. You've always been there for us, and we've never really acknowledged how much you've done. I've been blind to it, and I see now how wrong I've been. It was strange hearing them say these things, but they didn't feel like empty words this time. There was a sincerity in their voices that hadn't been there before. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't enough to erase the years of hurt, but it was a start, a real start. I sat down across from them, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't rush to speak. I needed them to understand. This wasn't about me accepting their apologies. It was about them understanding what had been lost. What I had lost. I'd spent my whole life being the one who gives. I sat quietly looking them both in the eyes. But I've realized something too. I've spent so much time being everything for everyone else, that I forgot about myself. I forgot that I have needs, that I deserve respect and love, not just when it's convenient. David looked down, the weight of my words hitting him. We've been selfish, Mom. I've been selfish, he said, his voice raw. I never meant to make you feel like you didn't matter. Sarah reached across the table, her hand resting gently on mine. I don't want you to feel like a burden anymore. I don't want you to feel like you're invisible in our lives. You're not. You've always been so much more than that to us. I sat back, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. This wasn't just a conversation about making things right. This was about setting a new foundation, one where I wasn't just the person who existed in the background of their lives. I was a person who had the right to ask for more time, more love, more respect. Thank you, I said softly. But I can't keep pretending I'm okay with just being your backup plan. I've spent years giving everything I had, and I've lost so much in the process. But I'm done being invisible. There was a long silence, a silence that felt like it was stretching across the table, across the years of hurt and misunderstanding. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was different. Because for the first time, I felt like I was finally being heard. Finally, David spoke, his voice steady. I know, Mom. I get it now, I really do, and I'm sorry. I'll do better. I will too, Sarah added, her voice softer now. I don't want you to feel alone anymore. I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. For now, it was enough. We sat there for a while longer, talking about things we'd never really talked about before. There was no grand resolution, no perfect solution. But there was something more important than that, understanding. Real understanding, and that for the first time in a long while, felt like enough. I left the cafe that day with a sense of quiet contentment. The The tension that had filled the air between me and my children was gone, replaced with something softer, more genuine. We weren't fixed. There was still work to be done, still healing to be had. But it was a start, a real start this time. As I walked back to my apartment, I realized how much had changed in such a short time. I had come to Rome thinking I was running away from my family, from my responsibilities, from the pain of being ignored. But in the end, I hadn't run away. I had run toward something new, something I hadn't even known I was searching for. I had run toward myself. The days that followed were filled with small victories. I didn't rush to fix everything, to make up for lost time. No, this time, I gave myself the grace to just be, to take things one step at a time. I spent the next few weeks reconnecting with my children, not in the frantic, guilt-ridden way I had before, but in a way that felt healthier. We shared meals, but they were no longer about me trying to impress or please. They were about simply being together, about acknowledging each other's presence without the need for apologies or explanations. Sarah came over one evening to visit, and we talked for hours, something we hadn't done in years. David stopped by on the weekends, not because he felt obligated, but because he genuinely wanted to. For the first time in a long time, I felt like my family was seeing me, and not just seeing me, they were appreciating me. But it wasn't just about them. I had changed too. I wasn't the woman who waited by the phone anymore. I wasn't the one who sacrificed everything to make sure everyone else was okay. I was living for me now, and that felt like freedom. The next month I went back to Rome, but this time, I went with a new sense of purpose. I didn't need to escape anymore. I didn't need to run away from my life. I went because I wanted to. I went because I deserved to. Walking down the streets of Rome again, I felt a strange sense of ownership, like the city was no longer a foreign place, but a part of my own story. I had learned something here. I had learned that I didn't have to be anyone else's idea of what a mother or a grandmother should be. I didn't have to wait for anyone to decide my worth. I was enough, just as I was. As I stood in front of the Trevi Fountain, watching the water cascade, I thought about all the things I had learned, about the courage it took to walk away from what didn't serve me, about the strength it took to speak up for myself when everyone else had ignored my voice for so long, about the quiet power of living life on my own terms. And then I smiled. Not the kind of smile I used to give when I was pretending, but the kind that came from deep within me. The kind that said, I've made it. I'm here. And I'm finally free. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a phone call. I wasn't waiting for someone else to change. I was living, fully and completely for myself. And that, I realized, was the most important journey of all.